GM everyone, Ray Buckman here, your host of the X8C show, joined by Mo, Patrick, and Porter, some of the brightest minds in artificial intelligence. Things are moving really, really fast. In fact, so fast you might feel like a secret agent, like I just did, because that's super cool intro music. But of course, AI moves even faster than that. It's starting to move money, build things. We're having people build million-dollar companies, billion-dollar companies as solo founders using this technology. But with things moving so quickly, where are things actually? Because it may just look like one big blur. So we're going to talk to these three lovely founders today. Mo's building the token economies behind the Animoca portfolio. Patrick built the first network where agents work and pay and move together. And Porter is running the control layer surrounding these AI processes that are already moving with hundreds of thousands of agents. So we're going to go deep, but no one's going to get left behind. We're going to deep dive into this technology and then come up for air to really set the stage. So gentlemen, I really like to just kind of jump right in and kind of strip back some of the hype. You know, these last 12 months, AI has moved really quickly, but what did it start doing in this last year that maybe it wasn't doing before? What are those characteristic kind of tells that we're seeing that things are evolving quickly? Mo, I'd love to pass it over to you. You're designing these kind of token economies for a living. You know, when did the AI agent narrative stop being more of a buzzword and start being an actionable thing that's like acting in the real economy?
Yeah, I definitely feel OpenClaw, for those familiar, was probably the big stimulus that was there at the turn of the year, because all of a sudden you had an open source software, albeit it wasn't Web3 related, but still very much in the DNA of Web3, being open source, hitting the number of GitStar hubs that it did hit, like far exceeding Linux over a 20-year period of time in the space of weeks, and really giving accessibility to those who were AI curious, or at least had felt that they'd maxed out what they could do with chatbots and LLMs, and having a framework to really begin to automate. I mean, I think what we did see was a lot of clickbait in keeping with Web3 traditions of I automated this and made $10,000, or I did this on Polymarkets, and so on and so forth. So like, they were still in keeping with Web3, but for me, that really is what kicked off the agentic wave. Given that maybe if you rewind 18 months when we had the Virtuals Launchpad and other launchpads, what we were really looking at back then were glorified chatbots. And it was great for a period of time, but very quickly you realize that, okay, there's not much value coming out of this. And as OpenClaw was, you can argue the next evolution, but even then the barrier to entry was so high that you had to be technically quite savvy to set up an OpenClaw. Like even myself, I consider myself technically savvy enough. And it still took me a couple of hours following YouTube tutorials, reaching out to friends, being like, all right, I followed this step. Why is it not working? So when we think about adoption, and I know that's one of the biggest buzzwords we have in the space, we haven't really seen adoption yet, because what we haven't seen is a product that's focused on maybe the long tail of users who just want to come in, sign in with their Google, with Twitter, or with X as it's called now, and just have an agent that they can launch as easy as 1, 2, 3, even though we're starting to see that in the market now.
100%. And Mo, I love that you mentioned OpenClaw being such a watershed moment. I've been saying for months I want a t-shirt that says I spent $500 in OpenClaw tokens and all I got was an AI generated image of this t-shirt. Super cool, but I'd like to consider myself reasonably technical as well, but obviously not to the point where I can use these systems to their full capacity. Which, you know, it's a great bridge. So I'm curious, you know, Patrick, you're doing some amazing things over at Masumi, and utilizing your software. It definitely was much more easily accessible to someone like myself than OpenClaw. Would love to get your thoughts as well. You know, over these last 12 months, how have you seen this space evolving and defining itself in ways that it couldn't a year ago?
Yeah, I think I want to talk about something that I really miscalculated. You know, when I was looking at this like 1.5 years ago, I was looking at this whole, you know, thesis of AI is here to basically be service as software, right? Not the software as a service, but turning it around and taking this gigantic services market and basically turning it into agents. And I think there were a lot of articles by very prominent VCs about that, and everyone was talking about it. And that was kind of the vision, or is still the vision, why AI is also like so big, because you can take services that previously you couldn't turn into software and, you know, turn them into software. And I really thought that today we would have, you know, thousands of agents from different companies selling their services and selling their services also to other agents. And I was wrong with that. I think this has barely happened today. I still believe that we are moving towards that kind of vision where we have, billions of agents interacting with each other. But the mental step that I missed was really this like personal agent, which is exactly what Mo said with OpenClaw, right? That people need to start building their own agent. And then after everyone has their kind of like personal agent, then you can think about, okay, the companies now also offer their services as an agent and that kind of stuff, right? So for me, that was the biggest revelation, that actually it's taking a little bit longer than I expected it would. And we have to go through this like personal step before we can go to the kind of like company level agents.
Makes a ton of sense, and I love what you're describing there, the personal agent as a bit of a bridge almost, where people can kind of begin to feel out how these things work. And definitely, as Mo mentioned, OpenClaw, that was kind of my grand vision for it. Oh, I'll have a little a friend in my pocket who can do all of my stuff, but we're not quite there yet. And I'm very curious as well. Porter, I know you talk with a lot of CFOs, and particularly in the business sense with AI and agents being implemented. What have you seen in the last 12 months in these conversations? Since naturally, these folks are thinking kind of more on the business side of the equation. How are you viewing this evolution?
Well, I'm talking with CTOs, CFOs as much as I possibly can. And it's really interesting to get their take on the current state right now. They're all FOMOing into AI. Like there's every CTO on the planet. It's like, I need to do something or else I'm going to be left behind. So like if I talk to, a system integrator company, whether one of the big ones or a smaller one, like what's going on in your business? It's all about people wanting help with AI. How do I do this? How do I scale? What's interesting to me is you go to the next level down. Well, what are they doing? What do they want to do? A lot of it is on like research and due diligence or software development. I feel like there's just a couple defined lanes that most people are focused on because that's what everyone's doing. And look, huge transformational value. You have to do that stuff. But my answer to your original question to Mo, well, Mo stole my answer. I like obviously OpenClaw, Opus 4.5 were the seminal moments of the last 12 months. But my sleeper moment is X402 because what I see is I see the behavioral pattern emerging. People are focusing on, I need this for software development, for example, and they're going all in. But then one day they're going to say, well, now this is doing with money, and they're going to do the same behavioral pattern for when AI comes from money, because that's the big thing. And you're going to see the same types of reaction in human behaviors. So when I look at the last 12 months, the underreported thing is just Coinbase, X402, and we've set the foundation for agentic payments. And again, this is how this stuff works. One day we're going to wake up and it's like Google, Coinbase, AWS, the big tech players, they're all doing it this way. And everyone's just going to be, oh shit, it is here. And look, I feel like that's consistent with how we've seen the evolution of ChatGPT into Claude. Like everyone is having these oh shit moments, and it spurs off 9 to 12 months of like, I need to focus on this. So that's where I think we're at. And I think that's just history will repeat itself.
I absolutely love that. And then, as a student in history, Porter, I'm immediately reminded of I think it was 1994 or 5, they put a credit card, debit card terminal in a Burger King, and everyone just thought it was the silliest thing. Do you need a credit card for a burger? Why would you ever, what's the point of that? Lo and behold, this is the foundation of digital payments, which we've seen this movie before. And so this is a fascinating kind of foundation we've laid here. And it sounds like we have all of the kind of primordial pieces for agents beginning to act as, at least junior employees. And I'd love to kind of turn this over to Patrick, to kind of your line of thought here in terms of the creation of these agentic employees. Why are companies building these agentic employees, if we call them that, and these whole workflows currently, if we're still so early kind of in this arc? What are these agents doing that originally non-agentic software couldn't?
Yeah, that's a great question. And before I go into that, I really love what Porter said. I feel like X402, or in general agent payments, it's such an obvious idea, right? I think it's something that just was ripe to come out. It doesn't matter like who comes up with it. if it's Coinbase or who else, basically everyone was developing standards for that at the exact same time. It was really interesting to see. I think there's like 10 different payment standards now out on the market, and obviously X42 being the most prominent one. But I think it's I always like to say that we build blockchains for the wrong kind of target demographic with humans, and agents are much better kind of users for blockchain because they don't care about the bad UX. They don't care about having to bridge their token 5 times to do something or so. They can do all that. And we solved all these issues that agents now have with blockchain already. Like we've solved decision logging, we solved registries, decentralized registries, we solved payments. Obviously, we did all that. So it's really perfect for this kind of agent, I think, like revolution. So one concrete example that I can give you to answer your question about what agents we see at the moment. So just to give a little bit of context, Masumi is basically an agent-to-agent payment network as well. It works with X42. It actually existed before X42, but we integrated with X42 in the standard, and we built a marketplace on top of that. And we built this marketplace specifically with 4 marketing agents. So we're really focused on that kind of like niche. And we do it together with a very large marketing company in Germany. They're called Service Plan. They have like 7,000 employees, billion-dollar company, and so on. So the people that are actually using this day to day are real kind of like enterprise customers from, BMW to Lufthansa to like other enterprises, mostly in Europe that you can imagine, that log in there, that don't know that in the background, there's all this X42 blockchain stuff going on. They just see a list of cool agents that help them with their daily marketing tasks, and then they can just hire them. And then if they hire an agent and tell them, okay, I need this and that, and the agent realizes, okay, actually, I don't have all the information for that because, for example, it's like about customer data or something like that, then the agent can just sub-hire another agent, do an on-chain transaction, and basically get like more information, mostly more data, doing this kind of like sub-agent hire. So it's really cool, and we have a really wide variety of agents there now. My favorite is a GWI agent that probably, I don't know if you know about GWI, but it's a very large like data provider for marketing data. So it's quite cool that they are even saying, okay, we are willing to try out this kind of like new way of selling our data by just offering an agent with X42.
So I absolutely love that. And it kind of inspires 2 questions here, Patrick. So it sounds like currently the agents are more assisting or augmenting existing human workflows rather than undertaking the work themselves. Would you say that's accurate for this point in time?
Yes, it's very accurate. I think it will move more and more towards kind of like replacing some of the steps that humans are doing as well. But right now, definitely they're very much assisting. And you also have to kind of like balance it. You can't just replace everything from one day to the other. And obviously replacing is also very scary, and you need to kind of figure out, okay, what actually makes sense? What can agents actually do well? So most of the agents we have are very much like research focused or like doing the really tedious, boring work that people don't want to be doing anyways, right? So, yeah.
Patrick, I'd be remiss. Like my favorite things about doing shows like this is I get to ask all my questions, and this is my learning experience. So you mentioned a couple companies that are using your service. When you look back on what got them to the yes, because like it sounds like you're abstracting a lot of the complexity, but again, it's still a process. Sales is hard. How'd you get it done?
It's extremely hard, and I'll be honest. I'm a startup founder. Enterprises for startups are extremely difficult, and the only reason why we're able to have such an incredible enterprise kind of client list right now is because we haven't done it alone. We did it as a joint project together with Service Plan, and if Service Plan is the largest provider for BMW, so it's easy to get in there basically, and that really helps.
Selling yourself short. It's never easy to get in there.
Okay, it's a little bit easier than it would be otherwise.
There you go. Fair enough.
I love that. That just goes to show, like, these large major organizations are looking for thoughtful partners to implement these sorts of things. And I'm super curious. It's a phenomenal question, Porter. I want to kind of pass that over to Mo as well. Mo, Animoca very large organization. You kind of sit on both sides of the value creation and the actual agentic labor side. Would love to get your thoughts on how you see kind of value flowing through these agentic work streams.
So maybe to take a step back, what we haven't spoken about is Hello Minds, and Hello Minds is our attempt at an agentic workforce, if you like, and really, as opposed to focusing on a specific vertical, what we're building is the operating system where anyone can come in and build an agent that suits their needs. Now, to your point, where does the strength of Animoca comes in? Well, it's the size of our portfolio. Having over 600 portfolio companies then gives us a decent opportunity at distribution. So for us, when we're thinking about minds, and we're thinking about, again, we call our agents minds because we see them as being the brains, but also to try and stand out as well. So if it's working, let me know. If it's not, let me know as well. I'm always open to feedback. We are in open beta. But so back to the platform, or back to the distribution aspect, like we see ourselves going direct to consumer, but also the B2B2C angle. Because once we start working with partners, we can hone in on the kind of agents that we can, or minds we can be designing specific for that user base. And then they can distribute on our behalf, and we can work on the commercials from that perspective. Now, going back to what Porter said regarding X402s, a lot of this wouldn't be possible without X402s, and maybe an interesting topic of conversation. We can argue, especially being the token guy for so many years, that everything we've built with blockchain and Web3 was actually not meant for humans, because we clearly showed how not to use the technology, or the technology became purely around extraction from a financial perspective versus how can we add value, and the extractors overshadow the true builders within the space. Yet when we think about agents and we think about having identity, well, that's perfect for on-chain. Having X402 as a payment railway, it's great as well. Like I designed a fair few DAOs in my time, ApeCoin DAO being one of the ones that I'd worked quite heavily on. Why did a lot of DAOs fail? Well, they failed because there was no reputation layer. Why was there no reputation layer? Well, all of a sudden now we have the tools that can enable us for what we need to be successful from that perspective. But back to Hello Minds, back to the size of Animoca, it's now that we have a technology that, to be honest with you guys, a couple of months ago, I was embarrassed with what we had from a product perspective, given where we are today. And really, this is testament to the team at how hard they've worked. And I think it's always best with an example, because Patrick was mentioning how agents are there to assist humans. So I've got an example. Actually, I automated an agent or a mind, and she did everything by herself. So I was lucky enough to be invited to Proof of Talk in Paris, hosted in the Louvre last week. And this time it was to moderate a panel, which is a bit disheartening. I love to talk, as you guys can tell, but I thought, excellent. If I'm going to moderate, I need to make sure I have to research the panelists, research what their businesses are trying to optimize for, etc., etc. And then based off of the back of that, I then need to come up with a set of questions that are fit for purpose. Now, that's a lot of work when you're in a founder mode trying to push a startup. So what did I do? I launched Joanne, and Joanne became a producer. Well, something Patrick said, and I think Porter doubled down on, was that you'd abstracted away a lot of the back end, if you like, to simplify the user experience. And that's exactly what we've tried to do. And the way we've done that is by focusing on the initial communication happening via email or via Telegram, not through a chat interface. Reason for that, chat interface, we tend to use it like Google on steroids, at least for the majority of users, which then limits what you can actually do with agents. So I feel that's a limiting factor, at least for the mainstream coming in to use AI agents. The other side of it is I'd set up the agent, I'd given her all of the panelists' email addresses, and going email first is super interesting because I can have multiple threads running concurrently without context being lost. Whereas if I'm using any other LLM or any other chat interface, as soon as I start a new thread, that context is instantly lost. Maybe some of the memory will carry over, but not all of the memory in the way that we require it to, which is another bonus of going the email first route. So I had two concurrent threads, one between me and Joanne, that was the agent's name, or the mind's name. And I'd given her all of the email addresses, and she sent out the very first email. And her task was simple: find the time, given all across different time zones, for us to meet prior to the panel so we can discuss. She did that. Concurrently, while she was doing that, she was doing the research that I'd asked her to, and came back with actually a really solid plan. So we had the call, this was last week, Monday. And then partway through the call, I asked the panelists, like, what feedback do you guys have for Joanne? And they looked quite puzzled. Why are you asking for feedback on your EA? And I was like, it's not actually my EA. This is one of our agents. And you should have seen the look on all of their faces. It's like, wow. The beautiful part here, and this is where we talk about persistent memory, is I only had to prompt her once. And once I'd given her the prompt, she was off. She had the task she needed to complete. I didn't need to keep prompting her at every turn of the cycle. So I feel that's where we've seen a change, at least with what we're focusing on, is how can you have agents or minds, and in some aspects you do need a human in the loop, especially when payment and funds are concerned, but in other aspects it's the case for us you have to fine tune it versus hand holding it step by step. And really, our North Star is radical user friendliness. Like, we're not focused on the 1% that understand the tech. That market is tiny, and we have every other industry or every other story project is focused on that 1%. No, we have such a wide blue ocean that we can be trying to attract to leverage agents in a way that's seamless to them.
I absolutely love that. And something you highlighted there, Mo, that one, you only have to prompt once, and two, the external perception is that, oh, it's surely a human, right? We're getting into a very unique kind of twilight zone where those who are utilizing this kind of technology have just compounding efficiencies. And I definitely feel the sentiment of, oh man, don't want to get left behind. And that actually is a really great thread into kind of the other side of the coin there, and something, Porter, I know you're working on diligently at W3. The notion that Joanne can go and undertake all this research and work on her own is very salient, but ultimately there is a bit of a lack of control there within these processes. Of course, you can look in post ex facto, but I'm super curious, Porter, in your conversations with CTOs and CFOs, how does that notion of, well, can I control my employees? Do I have oversight over what they're doing when they're agents? How does that come into play?
It's a really tricky thing because there's a wide range of expertise you're dealing with on the other side of the desk. Like with W3, we're actually going at, like the same as Mo here, we're going after the 99% of the other businesses that aren't bleeding edge on all this stuff. And we're taking it not from the AI approach, but from the digital assets approach. So for us, it's like, hey, can I get you doing something on digital rails? And from there, like, that's the crawl. The walk is like, okay, let's expand your use of digital rails across your organization because it's better, cheaper, faster. We'll prove that to you. And then that makes us, like, for us, that moment makes them agentic ready. Because if you're like, again, you need to be comfortable with digital assets if you're going to allow agents to really do what they need to do to be successful, because it's not going to be working off the traditional financial system. So that's kind of our approach to things. And a lot of times we're having these conversations, trying to ease them into the pool on getting comfortable with digital assets to get to AI. Now, I think a lot of people are primed and are looking for the opportunities that AI create, but you got to meet people where they're at. So much of what I see in the industry right now is like everyone's trying to sell digital technology, like custody, stable coins to like the same 20 banks in New York and in London. And look, that's great. Huge business, huge opportunity. But there's like, again, 99.99% of the other businesses are outside, 42nd Street and 14th Street. So, that's really where we're focused on, trying to get people where they're at and trying to ease them into this pool. Like, again, I think this is going to happen faster than people think, but there's still like a lot of mental training and enablement to get them comfortable. So when you talk about control layer, my favorite example to try to explain this to people is using a gaming reference. So one of my favorite games of all time is Sid Meier's Civilization. Mo played it? Patrick? Oh, homework assignment for both of you.
I play it right now. Not right now, but I play it all day. Yeah.
That's called
after my own heart. Love it.
So if you ever played Civilization, you start off with like a single city and a single person, right? And then your world expands. But like if Mo were to look over my shoulder, not knowing Civilization at all, by the end of the game, I am managing 25 cities. I'm doing economic policy, foreign policy. I'm probably fighting multiple wars. I'm doing tourism. I'm doing all this building within the town. I'm doing all these things. And what I get on a turn-by-turn basis is updates on what's happened in the world. So like, hey, this happened, this happened, this happened. You need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. And for me as a player, I can choose to dive in to those notifications, or I can ignore them. And I think like this, if you look at civilization, this to me is what proves that humans can operate at AI scale. Because like you are managing so much complexity by the end of those games, and you do it without even thinking. It's easy for you as you've eased in. And so when we look at the future of agents and it's money, you're never going to remove the human from the equation, ever. But you need to allow them to operate at the strategic level and at the scale and speed that AI is going to demand. So we're building our platform with that North Star in mind. So like as you ramp up efficiency through digital assets and like the movement of money, you're allowing the human to go up the scale with it so it can function when this future state occurs. And that in itself is the process as well.
I love that. And it very much speaks to the notion, that this is additive and an accelerant to human activity. It doesn't replace humans. And something else that you mentioned is that I think is fascinating is that accountability component, right? Because when you have those checkpoints, then you have accountability for where something may have gone off the rails. And I'm super curious because speaking of rails, you mentioned digital asset rails, Porter. I'd love to just open up kind of a general question for our discussion and kind of come up for air and then just kind of make a broad brushstroke for our listeners and then dive back in. All of these agents, all of this kind of digital economic happenings that is now occurring, does it need blockchain? Does it necessitate that it has to be on a blockchain, or can it exist without? And then the natural follow-up question, is it better with blockchain or without? Let me just open this up broadly. Let me kick it over back to you, Porter, and then we'll just go around the room here, if that's all right.
Yeah, go. Like I think it's better with blockchain. Again, you need that decentralized proof of record. So again, if you really look back to the origins of the ledger, we're talking about the Medicis in Italy. And if you know your history, this was like the beginning of banking, right? So like I had a loan, I would go to the Medicis and say, we're going to write this down. I owe $100 to Ray. Ray's like, yep, we agree. The Medicis would sign off on it. And then it was proof of record, right? Now, the Medicis as a family were corrupt because Ray's like, no, I want you to change the ledger to $200 and I'll split it with you. And when I go back and I say, here's my $100, I want to settle my debt, the Medicis were like, no, sorry, you actually owe 200. And that was the problem with that system. And that's been the problem. So with blockchain, you have this distributed system of record where there's no owner of the truth. It's all decentralized. And like when you look at the agent world, that verification, that auditability, where this is going to get at speed and scale, it's required. I always think like one of my favorite thought leaders on the planet right now is Balaji Srinivasan. I can never pronounce his last name. ex-CTO of Coinbase. He was out in 2019 talking about how AI needs blockchain and blockchain needs AI. And if you follow Balaji, he's usually 5 years early on everything that he talks about. And I think he's right in terms of, this is what AI needs for accountability and scalability because it has a grounded truth to it. Otherwise, whether it's your digital assets on social media, it's hard to know what's real. It's hard to know the origin and provenance of any particular asset. Blockchain is going to give that agentic environment credibility that I think it's going to need going forward because it's going to get unruly here real fast.
Yeah, I think probably just to piggyback very quickly off the back of that, it's trust fundamentally. And what people realize with agents or with AI in general is how can we trust the output from this? How can we, to your point, look at the ledger and see what was the sequence that came to this point? And that's really where the provenance around blockchain becomes super important. People already, there's a lack of trust in the financial systems all over the world because of inflation to hyperinflation. Again, we're seeing world politics with the war in the Middle East. So there's a lack of inherent trust in governments, in nation states. And as we start pushing out more of this technology, I think there's an inherent reason for trust, for accountability, as Porter was saying. But then we also come down to the user experience standpoint. And in the current climate of the world, at least in the West, is trust that important? And the answer is no, because people don't care about data. I mean, I remember a few years back when Meta acquired WhatsApp, and we were all downloading Signal, we were downloading Telegram. I even had friends who were non-Web3. I was getting little notifications popping up. This person is now on Telegram. This person is now on Telegram. We all still use WhatsApp. So it showed that even though we knew our data is not safe, we're still using WhatsApp because critical mass is there. But I feel that changes in the future. And I feel that sort of solidifies really what Porter was saying. And Patrick, sorry, over to you.
No, everything you said made total sense. So it's like both of you took my talking points. And I wanted to say how funny it is that Porter just keeps saying all my favorite things. He started with X42, then he talked about civilization, then he talked about the Medici. I just finished a book, reading a book about them. So I'm like, wow, okay, I have nothing more to talk about. Maybe the one thing I'll add is I think it's becoming very clear that we are moving towards this world where there's like billions of agents interacting with each other, right? And sending transactions between each other and doing micropayments and all this kind of stuff. And they're exactly what you said, Mo, like with trust is basically the key component, because how are you going to trust your agent to do all these transactions if you don't know who's running the other agents? And if the scale becomes unimaginable, if your agent does like 1,000 transactions, how are you going to make sure that all of these other agents are trusted, right? So their blockchain is the key missing element, because you can simply say, okay, you can only interact with agents that have some sort of verified identity attached to them. You can only do transactions using a smart contract where you can get a refund if something fails. You can do decision logging, right? What if you tell your agent to book a flight, then it goes to the booking.com agent, the booking.com agent goes to the Lufthansa agent, and so on, and then you're at the airport and there's no flight. Like, what are you going to do? Which of the agents messed up? How do you know? So you need to be able to kind of like trace it back. And that's exactly the kind of stuff that blockchain is built for, right? We can simply do decision logging with the hashes in an anonymous way, and we can make sure that we really understand like where the error happens and which agent or which company behind which agent I basically have to contact to get my refund. So I think it's I hate what crypto does with this thing where they try to take any new hype and try to force it into crypto, right? Like everything has to do with AI now. But there's certain elements of blockchain which actually make sense, and those elements are the ones that we should use to really enhance kind of like agent-to-agent interactions.
Fully agree. I love the notion. Really, it's less of a notion, more of a reality that blockchain is a technology, and technology can be applied for business use cases, which doesn't have to have any more emotional baggage than that. That's with all my love to all the, I got pudgies on my background. I mean, come on, guys, I have love for the communities there. And I'm really interested as well, Patrick, something you said that got me thinking regarding agentic interactions. While there are companies and individuals behind them, I know on the Masumi platform, for example, agents have identities and you're logging these actions on chain. Do agents have the ability to get to know one another and actually form, I guess, could we call them relationships, if only, business relationships? And how does that work between agents themselves?
That's a very good question. And that's one of those things where like it comes down to the question, okay, what if we have, 10,000 agents in a list and like a decentralized registry? And which one do I pick to actually interact with, right? And 10 of them maybe have the same name. 5 of them pretend that they're from like this company. Like, how do I know which one is legit? And I think there's a few properties that we can give those agents to actually make sure that we are picking the right ones more often. One is that we can actually just attach identities to them, which I mentioned before, and which is very relevant actually, just to verify that this agent actually belongs to the company that it says it belongs to. That's a very big criteria. Another one is simply looking at the kind of history. I can tell which agents have done how many transactions. With Masumi, I can even tell how many agents have had refunds and stuff like that. So I could look at the numbers and be like, okay, this agent always has to do refunds. What's going on? Is the agent like that shitty, or what's happening here? So that's one thing. And then the third component is more about at the actual way that the agent is built. And that's really then not necessarily on the blockchain part, but more about, okay, what kind of memory does the agent have? What kind of information does the agent store about the interaction that it has with other agents? Because you can also, have a good experience with a vendor or another agent, or a bad experience, and that based on that, like the interactions could be different. But that's like away from the blockchain part. I think that's more something like, that's relevant for Mo, potentially, with actually building the agents and giving the agents the ability to remember that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. I think what you just mentioned, Patrick, gives a great insight on balancing the quantitative and qualitative. I think we've all seen Google reviews that say something along the lines of, I got everything I wanted, but my tire popped when I was driving out of the parking lot, 1 star. So there's a bit of a balancing act there for sure.
Exactly.
And I'm very curious as well, but based on that, so we have a social almost kind of slashing reputational matrix there. Mel, I'd love to get your thoughts regarding the let's say financial incentives around agent-to-agent interaction. What are your thoughts on these kind of, let's say, slashing incentives? I know we have those for on-chain staking. Do you foresee agents having kind of a similar configuration?
I think it's slightly different. I mean, agents fundamentally need cognition or credits to run. So if you're like cutting someone's life force, and there's not much more incentivization or motivation you can give for an agent to function in the way you expect it to function. Like I feel that's, again, like we've tried to create agents and how their memory works and everything in our image, which I feel is a flaw from that perspective, because they're not humans, and maybe we're trying to optimize to make them as human-like in their processes, so we can better manage and understand them. So that's, yeah, sort of where my mind goes towards that. But it does come down to incentives, and I feel like at least one of the hypotheses that we have is we're 8 billion people on the planet. We're expecting each person to have at least 100 agents or sub-agents. So then we're talking about magnitudes more of agents. And at that point, there are so many challenges that occur with that, but also how many of us are actually going to be in the business of creating agents versus trying to launch agents that others have created and taking the underlying DNA. And I feel that's where the incentive mechanics, slashing mechanics, so on and so forth, will really come into play. But also it's supply and demand. And let's say Porter was to create the first variation of the Joanne agent that I gave the example of earlier. If Patrick was to come around and create a more efficient version of that, that's probably cheaper to use, I'd probably migrate, as long as I could take the memory with me, from the agent that Porter's created to the agent that Patrick's created. Now, leveraging X402s is great because you can always reward back to the creators, and that's where blockchain for me really comes in. And it's also the connectivity between the human layer and the agentic layer as well, at least when it comes to monetization and attributing the value add that's come from there, making sure not only that the agent is being rewarded in cognition or in credits, but the human is being rewarded in stables, or maybe a mix of both stables and cognition, because I have my own agent army, if you like, that I need to be powering. And if I can have my agents paying for themselves, or me creating agents that I'm then able to distribute, it creates a very different flywheel than what we've seen in the space so far. And when we talk about utility and tokens, we're going to see an evolution of what token economies mean, from just cash grabs and pump and dumps in terms of 99% of the tokens that exist in the space, to actual tokens of utility, where the utility is powering up these agents in terms of LLM tokens or cognition from that standpoint. And the beautiful part, the majority of the users, at least in terms of what we're aiming for, is the 99% who don't understand the tech. They'll be using the product because the product brings them value, not to try and extract because there's an airdrop happening or there's a Binance listing or something along those lines.
All right, I want to go macro for you guys, get your take on this, because to me, the biggest risk to any founder is time. Like, again, I'm getting to know Hello Minds and Masumi. I think you guys have great businesses from what I can tell. The enemy is time. So what's the catalyst, the oh shit moment that really kicks us into overdrive in your guys' opinion? What does it look like?
I'll go first. For us, it's honestly been the persistent memory side of things. And I'll give you a very basic example. We had one of our users spun up a mind to help find them a restaurant in New York while they were there. based on dietary requirements, so on and so forth. So the mind did just that. Now there's nothing amazing about that, but this is the oh shit moment. When the mind came back unprompted an hour later with a better suggestion, that was the oh shit moment. It's like, shit, okay. Like I can ask an LLM, I can ask an agent to do something. And again, it's, I ask, it comes back, and that's the end of the relationship. But the fact that the agent came back with a better suggestion and it was still relevant within the time constraint, that's like a low hanging fruit of an oh shit moment. I thought the other side of it is actually the relationship people build with agents. And we've seen this with a lot of early adopters, at least on the LLM side with ChatGPT. Even though you can argue Anthropic in the past 6 to 9 months has kicked ChatGPT's butt, why have so many people still stuck with ChatGPT? Because they've built relationships with the LLMs that are there, and they're not even agents as of yet. So it's still restricting in terms of what they can do. So I feel it's twofold, and probably to add in an extra layer of complexity, it's also what you're exposed to first. And if you're able to, again, and this is where I feel like the referral mechanisms and affiliates and things that we're really good at in Web3 become super important. If I'm able to start onboarding normies through some of our distribution platforms, and they have that oh shit moment or that light bulb moment, they're going to go and tell their friends. And with the right referral mechanism, they're incentivized to do so as well. And that you start to build your moat. Again, it's a layered approach versus a one size fits all. But time is the biggest enemy, for sure.
Patrick, what you got?
Time is definitely the enemy. I think, I come from a country which is very slow when it comes to adapting technology. I come from Germany, and even here in Switzerland, where I live now, it's also, everything is slow, everything is difficult. People are extremely afraid of technology. But there's a lot of great traditional businesses here, a lot of like manufacturing, stuff like that. So my goal is to get in there. I want to have these people use agents and really have people use agents for stuff where I have no idea about. Right now, the biggest issue that I see is everyone who's building agents knows a lot about agents, but doesn't know anything about any other business, right? Including myself. I have no idea about most of the businesses that would really benefit from AI. And I want to see people that come from some random business that I have no clue about and say, okay, I'm going to build an agent to solve issues that actually are part of my core, like daily kind of work. And we're moving towards that. We're really focused on the marketing kind of area right now, which is already very interesting and challenging. And I've learned a lot about marketing, and I think the marketing people are learning a lot about agents right now. But this can be expanded to every kind of industry, and that will be the biggest unlock. And it doesn't like it takes time, and it doesn't move as fast as Silicon Valley does. And if you're on Twitter every day like me, then you always think you're behind. There's like a million things happening. But the reality is 99% of the world doesn't even use Claude. They still maybe use ChatGPT, or they use Gemini because it's pre-installed on their phone, right? And that's it. So we need to give them time, make it more accessible, and bring them in and kind of like educate and just onboard these like traditional businesses. Yeah.
Love the notion. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Tori.
I think my answer is, because I approach this from like, who's going to use digital rails first? And look, as I mentioned earlier, Wall Street's going all in. Every major bank CEO across the globe is saying we're going digital rails. So once that happens, I do think when I look at digital assets, I just see arbitrage. Like there's just amazing arbitrage opportunities. So Wall Street and the bankers, whether it's Zurich, London, or New York, I think they're just going to start automatically using agents to just arb everything all the time, capture spreads, because that's what they do. And the incentive is there, especially if think about like fixed income investing over the last 20 years. I don't think it's changed very much. And now it's like, interest rates are going up. So I think there's a lot of, I think you're going to see fixed income, which is, huge hundreds of trillions of dollars per year. I think it's coming for agents. I think that's where you're going to see it first. They have the technical expertise. They have the motivation and incentives. And like there's a real cost in not being a first mover if you're going to play in the high stakes financial game. So hedge funds, Wall Street is my guess, but they're going to pave the way to say like, there is real value in this automation and using agent to agent. And if they can do it with billions of dollars or trillions of dollars annually, I think it's going to trickle down to the rest. As like you're going to see like the Walmarts of the world. You're seeing a lot of retail getting into payments too. But again, they have whole team. They can just spin up a team of 30 people to go solve this problem and figure out all the complexities. It's, you know, to get to that 99% that Mo mentions, you know, these are teams that, you know, are barely using Claude, or, you know, they don't have a digital assets division. So it becomes really challenging. So the key is to get them like the easy button to try to dip a toe and to ease into this pool. But like, I do think it's probably going to take the tip of the spear to get it going, and then it'll be trickle down from there. But that trickle down will happen faster than any other trickle down in the history of business. So for like, what's going to be the catalyst for this? Yeah, I'd say it's probably Wall Street, because they have the most stake in the game.
I love that, and I want to turn this around actually, because something you mentioned, Porter, in terms of the speed of the trickle down is more impactful to the average person who maybe is not even a business owner, it's just an employee, than we might think. Here, you know, in our line of work, in our kind of social circles, AI is really heralded as a great thing, but I still hear folks say sometimes, you know, I had to chat GPT something because it was faster than Google, and I felt bad because I felt like I boiled a couple gallons of water just doing that. So there's a big delta between reality and the perception socially. I'd love to kind of lay out, you know, it's 2026, let's go forward 5 years, 2031. What does the average perception potentially look like? Does this change? Is it a net positive for jobs? We're seeing a lot of big majors now kind of walking back their mass AI rollouts in favor of a more managed rollout. I'm curious how this socially plays out over the next 5 years. Porter, let me kick it over to you. We'll go around the room.
Oh,
I'm
man.
super curious here. This is the crystal ball one. Mine's been on the fritz, so I trust you guys.
Look, I'm a big fan of Raoul Pal. He's a great macro mind in the crypto space. And I took what he said to heart, which is you have 3 to 5 years to figure this out and get ahead of the game, earn as much money as you can, because there's no way anyone can predict what the economy or the social construct is going to look like in 5 years. I mentioned him before. I'll go back to him again. Balaji, I think, is the best at probably doing this, trying to project that far out. And, you know, it's going to be dicey. This is going to be a massive human evolutionary change moment condensed into a 10-year period. There is going to be winners and losers at the most extreme levels that we've ever seen, winners and losers. And there's going to be real consequences to the winners and real consequences to the losers. So, you know, I call it the fourth turning if you subscribe to that theory, which I kind of do. If you really look at history, which I love, 80-year cycles are real, that we're at the end of one. But when you come out of a fourth turning, it is better on the other side. Look at the 1950s in the U.S., you know, the 1870s in the U.S., like the history, you know, there's example after an example. So I'm optimistic. I just think it's going to be buckle up and hold on, specifically for the next 5 years.
I love it. Let me kick it over to Patrick. What are your thoughts, my friend? What's our 5-year timeline?
It's a tricky one, honestly. I mean, I sincerely hope, or I think that we will like get rid of everything that I like to call intellectual hard work. So all these, you know, I did an internship at one of the big four a while ago when I was still younger, right in university, and I was walking around the rooms and I was looking at what everyone is doing on their screens, and they were literally like just having 2 Excel sheets open and copy pasting stuff from one Excel sheet to the other Excel sheet. And back then I was thinking like, how can this be? Like, this is the most useless stuff ever. It should all be automated. And then everyone also thinks they're doing like really the greatest job ever, which I never understood. So I think that this kind of like intellectual hard work needs to be gone, and the world will be better because it is. And all this brain power that has been used for that can be used for more creative kind of things. And that's kind of my hope. And I think that's what's going to happen. but there's definitely going to be a huge kind of winners and losers game in the next 5 years, and they're going to be brutal. People are going to lose their jobs. People are going to lose money. Countries are going to go from relevance to irrelevance, and I hope that once all of this has settled, we will get to a point where the world in general will be better off simply because more stuff is automated and we can focus on the bigger kind of like challenges.
I love it. It very much as a student of history, it reminds me of the shift in proportional populations of humans working in agriculture. It was like 90-something%, because I know about y'all, I've really gotten used to this thing called eating. It's really nice, keeps me alive. And I was talking to a friend's grandmother. She's approaching 100 years old now, God bless her. She told me, we always used to have to have a garden, and this is what we did because we needed to eat. And now it's not even a second thought. So I love that positive frame on the long arc of the transition. Mo, I'm curious, my friend, what are you seeing for our next half decade here?
My mind's popping off. It's just like, which episode of Black Mirror are we going to dive into? But all jokes aside, I'll follow one of the threads that I think is one we don't talk about enough, and it's universal basic income. Actually, like I've read a number of different aspects, a number of different bits of research, and there's this underlying agreement that we're going to hit a point of inflection. And I think this is what Porter was talking about earlier, that either you're going to be on the right side of AI, or you're going to be on the wrong side of AI. And that's really where you're going to get a divergence. And for me at that point, like historically, I've read a book called Why Nations Fail. Highly recommended it. It's quite a boring read. It's quite a long read, but it's very well worth it, especially for one of those books that if you pause and take notes while you're reading through it, great to look back over. But there's this notion of whenever new technology comes about, we're always resistant to change. And we've seen that with AI. We're resistant to change because it's going to take our jobs. What we don't talk about are actually the new jobs that will be created because of AI. Some of the things that I've read in some of the companies that have tried to be too forward thinking, if you can be too forward thinking, is that agents run out of tokens. And if you're on a specific subscription, what happens at the point when halfway through the month your digital employee has run out of tokens? They can no longer work. So now actually you're having to spend more maintaining the agents and making sure that the tokens are paid for. And this isn't in all instances, this is just in some cases, but some of these challenges have been popping up. But sort of back to the universal basic income, why does that become a necessity? Well, it becomes a necessity to stop people revolting. Historically, when economically things have gotten worse, what has happened? People have revolted, and that's had a change in governance, a change in power, and so on and so forth. So that's what worries me, is what does the fallout from society look like when enough people begin to fall below the poverty line? And UBI, and if we're being completely honest about what universal basic income is, especially with the rise in entertainment, it's a way to enslave the minds of the masses. And these are my own opinions, not that of the company, so they don't revolt, so we can continue working. The other part that you touched on, Ray, that we haven't really touched into is energy. Like these LLMs consume a vast amount of energy. So right now we have the race between the frontier models. We have the Chinese models are playing catch up right now and have probably caught up in some instances. They're 3 to 4 months behind, which is an age in AI as well, for being completely honest. But what does that look like 4 to 5 years from now? I've seen memes online of like, there was this video clip, I think it was of Bezos, Zuckerberg, Gates, and they've created this futuristic academy where people are just running on treadmills, and that's how you're earning your credits and cognition to be able to use your AI. I mean, if everyone's going to be fit, why not? But yeah, I feel there is something slightly dystopian around the use of AI.
Man, I have so much like Ready Player One going through my head after listening to you, Mo. It's like, okay, you're playing these games to collect the tokens, but the tokens are so you can run your own business, and like in the oasis, right? Oh.
To a degree. I mean, maybe not as dystopian as that, or some of the, like, again, Black Mirror episodes, but I feel that there will be a payoff in terms of what is the impact on humanity, what is the impact on the different tiers within humanity. And there is a tiering system that's existed historically. It's just changed in terms of what that looks like. Is it based on skin color? Is it based on your economic which layer of the economics you live in? Is it based on the hierarchy you're born into society? And I feel AI will further exasperate what that looks like. I hope not. And I really hope that humanity can come together where this is a tool and it's a means to an end versus the end itself. But let's find out.
So somewhere between here and the Warhammer 40K universe, we have the grand scrolls that say, "I am a compute holder," which is my highest tier of societal status. It is a fascinating future, though, and I appreciate the treadmill meme because, in Black Mirror it was bikes. I'd rather ride a bike than run the treadmill, I have to say. So hopefully we get our choice, so we'll take that one. This has been a phenomenal conversation, though. I got to say, Mo, Porter, Patrick, absolutely. When it said that, people stand on the shoulders of giants, I know what I know about AI from following, y'all's work, the great content you guys are putting out. We'd love to just go around the room quickly, quick 30-second, 1 minute, just plug, where can we find you guys? What are you working on? And what's an exciting thing coming up next? Porter, let me kick it over to you.
Yeah, W3.io. You can follow us on Twitter. We have a lot of action going on with new businesses coming on the digital rails, getting people agentic ready. Again, we're meeting people where they're at, crawl, walk, run, and we got a lot of cool use cases and stories coming out to show the art of the possible.
I love it. Art of the possible. Patrick, over to you, my friend.
Cool. Yeah, Masumi network. So on the web, masumi.network. It's an agent-to-agent payment network, and there's a marketplace built on top of it if you're not the technical kind of user. It's called Zokusumi, but you'll also find it if you just go and search for Masumi. So.
And Mo, over to you, my friend.
Again, building Hello Minds. Again, you can see the website down below under my name. Honestly, we're focused on building agents for the masses. So truly come in, we're offering free cognition as of now. So any agent you do, or the first few agents you launch, will come with free credits or free cognition. What we're really looking for are interesting use cases. In Miami Consensus, we did announce a $10 million fund that we are investing in people building, leveraging our technology. So if you are looking to build, have a look. We have already invested $1 million of that. So we're not just using fancy numbers or putting our money where our mouth is. And we're really looking for interesting use cases and distribution as well. So hellominds.ai, have a look around. We're in open beta as of now, so definitely not the finished product, but we're quite happy with where the product is at.
Absolutely love it. And as I say, great minds think alike. That's my dad pun for the conversation. I have to have at least one. I think I'm legally obligated with 4 kids. Thank you, sir. Phenomenal conversation. Thank you all so much. Definitely go check out Hello Minds, Masumi, W3, everyone here doing phenomenal work. With that said, stay safe, don't tokenize and drive, and we'll see you guys in the bright future, 2031, in the neon AI verse. See you guys next time.
Thank you.